All right, you saw the title. You know what we're here to talk about. Are comics dying? Now, before we get into that, I do want to preface this by stating one thing to all of the keyboard warriors who aren't even watching this video and just leaving comments down below, and you know who you are. Me showing the numbers, which I will spoil for you, are going to show that the comic book industry is doing well, but me showing these numbers does not invalidate your opinion on the quality of comic books. It doesn't change things if you don't like something in the world of comic books. The sales of comic books can do well, and you can not like what's going on in comic books. You might be wondering, Benny, why are you wording it in this way? And the reason is simple. The sales of comic books and their numbers, unit sales, how well they're doing, is one of the many things that the people who want to make everything political have made political. You might also be wondering, why haven't you ever commented on this before, and why are you now? Well, I want to explain that. And if you don't care about my explanation, you can click the link and go right to the actual numbers. Now, first off, I don't spend a lot of time looking across social media unless I'm looking for a specific topic for a video. So the latest movie or the latest thing happening in the world of comics, which means generally I don't see comments involved in the "are comics dying" or the political arguments. I've actually got most of the political terms kind of blocked across my social medias because the political arguments are things that I've never really cared to be a part of. I've always looked at comic books as something fun to read. I read what I enjoy, and then I make a video about it. If I didn't enjoy it because it was too heavy-handed with its messaging, or I didn't like the direction they took my favorite character, or there was a problem with the comic book, I just never talk about it again, and I never cover it. And that's always been my opinion on the state of comic books. I read what I enjoy, and I don't talk about things I don't enjoy, which makes it easy to not get involved in the political argument. The comments that I have seen about comics are dying or DC's killing it with their woke movement, I've always kind of ignored because if you're a video gamer, you're used to hearing that your favorite game is dead, even though you're sitting there with all of your buddies enjoying it. So I always took it as people stating that comic books are dead. Well, okay, that means they're dead for you. That doesn't mean they're dead for me, so I mostly ignored that type of an argument. On top of that, I've never seen a decrease in the number of comic books being released. If comic books were legitimately dying, I don't think I would have to read 50 to 60 comic books in any given month, and that's only DC and Marvel. So if comics were dying, I'm pretty sure DC would start to roll back their rollouts and stuff like that. And if you're arguing that all the books have been Batman for the last 2 years, well, we did a whole video on how that ended up happening and what fell through. So they were still like 50 Batman books though, okay? It was still 50 books. What finally did get me to do this research and figure this whole thing out is because I've seen an overwhelmingly larger number than normal, a series of comments that basically stated comics are dying, this is why comics are dead, manga is beating comics. Now that last one is what got my attention finally, because what a lot of people don't realize, and you can go watch our Comicstorian channel that we've relaunched for the 4th time to figure out why, I read about as much manga as I do comic books, with the exact same philosophy. I stay out of most of the communities and just read what I want to read and enjoy it and talk about it. We've had a Comicstorian channel 4 times in the past, and now this is our 4th launch on that one, and that's a whole different story for a different day. But what I wanted to make a video for is manga versus American comic books, and how I feel about manga finally beating American comic books, finally being the thing that was propping up American comic books, and why I think this could have happened. Well, that led me down a hell of a rabbit hole doing a ton of research in which I went into expecting to find numbers that said manga is beating American comic books in our own market, and well, what I found was the exact opposite. So that video is getting completely reworked to be manga versus American comic books, the narrative structure, the storytelling, the way the graphic novels are sold. And that's going to be a different video. But with all of this data, I didn't want to waste it. I wanted to put it up in video since so many people want to tell me that comic books are dying, which once again, I never truly believed, but data for a different video led to this video. But again, I want to state, it doesn't matter how well things are selling. If you don't like them, that's fine. You're allowed to have that opinion. You're allowed to dislike the direction that DC is going, or dislike what Marvel is doing, or dislike the latest thing in the Power Rangers comic book. You are allowed that. It is okay. So, as we go into the data that I have gotten, and I'm going to show you how I got to these numbers, you're going to see that American comic books are in no way, shape, or form failing. DC and Marvel are not dying, but indie comics are doing a lot better, and manga has made a crazy amount of strides. So I'm going to get off the camera now because I just want to show you guys data at this point, and let's get into my core topic, are comics dying. And one last thing, because I know there's going to be comments telling me to go debate people and argue with people, and what about these other people's numbers? I don't care. Like I said at the beginning, I read what I want to read and I enjoy what I want to enjoy, and I'm not here to debate. I just wanted to show you guys the information that I found, because so many of you are saying comics are dying, and I found the exact opposite information while looking for how they're dying. So here we go. And this all brings me to the start of the video. Are comic books dying? So in order to try and make this as factual as humanly possible, let's start with this image. This one shows a very telling story. It lacks any information that is actually useful. According to the image, comic books have generally only increased since 2012, going from $805 million as an industry to just under $2.1 billion as an industry. Now, this industry number is broken down into 3 numbers, and we'll use 2021 for the sample, but don't worry, I'm going to come back to some of those previous years. So in 2021, as you can see, the biggest growth is from graphic novel sales at $1.47 billion. Comic books generally count as singles, or floppies as some people call them, and that is another $435 million. And then digital sales make up about $170 million. We saw increases in those singles and in the digital, but it's the graphic novels that are the most interesting. Many in the industry view that rise as a win. The industry is booming. But there are some that take a different view and stance on this. You see, when counting graphic novels, manga is actually counted as a graphic novel. Manga doesn't sell singles here in the US outside of Shonen Jump, which is a collection of chapters. So the only way to get manga is to buy what this chart is calling a graphic novel. Now, this is actually where my research started. I'm a huge fan of manga, and I'm someone who has watched anime since I was a teenager and read manga just as long. I was in the camp of manga is just better and finally winning. This data that I was collecting was originally to show that manga was clearly booming in the US and leaving comics in the dust, and I was going to go into why I feel that's happening. Overall, I think it's due to the nature of manga, being one single storyline, marketing, anime linking into the manga, just to name a few reasons, all of which are going to be in that other video. But again, I was looking at the numbers to show how well manga was doing in America, and I'm going to tell you right now, I was wrong. But we're going to come back to that exact math in a minute. So to start with, I started looking at market shares. Market share is defined out of total purchases of a customer of a product or service. What percentage goes to a company defines its market share. So what that boils down to is out of the $2.1 billion earned, the market share is how much goes to each company. So let's have a look at the market share of 2021. Now, I had some real difficulty finding the entire year, but I was able to get fourth quarter's numbers. Marvel's at 31%, DC is at 27%, other publishers at about 24%, and then Viz and Kondasha are at 2.6% and 1.2% respectively. Now, I use Viz and Kondasha as they are the largest publishers of manga in the US right now. And just so you know, since I'm using the fourth quarter, these numbers could fluctuate a little over the course of the year, but drastic swings aren't typical. This tells a different story than what I was looking at originally. How can collectively the two biggest only hold 3.8% of the market? But manga is finally beginning to overtake the US market. So I had to do a little bit more research and figure this out, because I see the articles like My Hero Academia has sold 1.8 million copies, while some of the biggest comic books in 2021 have only sold around 500,000. So the first thing I did was compare it to another random year. 2015 was right before DC's big boom with DC Rebirth and their repricing structure. So I figured let's have a look back then. Back in 2015, we had a different way to track, and it was far deeper. Here you can see similar looking numbers, but we also get to see the unit market share. Now, unit market share is the units sold by a particular company as a percentage of market sales. We're going to come back to unit sales later, but I thought it'd be fun to put it on the screen right now, but you really just need to look at the left column here. Now, what we see in 2015 is that Marvel was at 38%, DC was at 25%, Viz was at 0.93%, and Kondasha, even though it existed back then, wasn't even ranking in the US. So using those numbers, yes, manga has pushed a little above 3.8% of the market share in the US in about 8 years. Yes, they are making huge strides and growing rapidly. There are a lot of reasons for this, all of which are smart marketing and moves by that industry, and I don't want to discount them for it. Also, while DC went up to 27% in 2021, they also got to about 29% in 2019 when I looked that one up. But what I'm getting at is that Marvel may have lost some ground over the last 8 years, but everything else is booming. From Image growing, Boom growing, and newer publishers showing up. The loss of Marvel's 7% in the last 8 years could be attributed to the size of the market now. So what this overall shows is that the industry is booming. Marvel and DC are far in the lead in terms of dollars earned. Manga is growing rapidly, but has not overtaken anything in the American market yet. but I used some key phrasing here in terms of dollars earned. I posted up a few questions related to this topic on my Twitter to get the information I seemed to be lacking, and quite a few people wanted to argue dollars are up, but unit sales are down. So at first I went in and did some basic comparison. I pulled up some information from 2012, 2015, and 2021's end-of-year reports. I looked at all of the rankings and picked some arbitrary numbers. This seemed to be the easiest and simplest way to straight up compare data. For the sake of the video, I grabbed the rankings of 50 to 60, so you guys can see what I'm talking about. And looking at 2012 to 2015 to 2021 side by side, things are not looking good. There's a clear decline in units sold. We had growth from 2012 to 2015 right before the big rebirth spikes looked good, and then 2021 isn't looking good in comparison. After tweeting about this, that there's a decline in comics on the floppy side, but it's not that drastic, I realize my mistake. You see, this is a slice of data which makes it pretty inconclusive. We don't know what was happening in each of these years, what was actually being tracked, what movies came out, what promotional material did the companies put out each year, were they doing any big events? So grabbing a random slice of sales really doesn't provide solid data. So instead, I decided I'd go back and grab the overall sales numbers for the top 50 comic books in each year from 2013 to 2021. Basically, I went down and counted up the unit sales of 1 through 50 for each of these years. The top 50 books should be pretty telling as to how well the industry is doing. And you might be wondering why I didn't grab 2012. Well, by the time I got to 2013, the picture was pretty clear. So adding up unit sales for the top 50 comics got me these numbers. 2021 was 8.8 million, 2020 was 3.7 million, that was the COVID year. 2019 was 8 million, 2018 was 8.4 million, 2017 was 6.2 million, 2016 was 8.2 million, 2015 had 11.5 million, but some of that is attributed to Loot Crate putting in comic books and counting those as sales, and Star Wars blowing up at 1 million units sold. 2014 was 5.4 and 2013 was 7.1. But as you can see, 8 million comic books sold is indeed an increase in the industry, not including the manga side of it. And if we skip 2020, because everyone wants to think that 2020 didn't exist, it looks even better. So okay, this is pretty obvious that we're doing better now, but a number wasn't adding up for me. You see, I saw people bragging about the numbers for Demon Slayer, how it crushed the entire US market in 2020, how in 2021, My Hero Academia sold 1.8 million copies, along with Demon Slayer breaking 2.25 million in 2021. But if King's Spawn, which was the top-selling book in 2021, sold only 480, and that's our top US seller, and Demon Slayer sold 2.25 while My Hero sold 1.8, how the hell does the market share breakdown only give Viz 2.6? On top of that, I thought about this on a larger scale. If comic books were peaking at 480,000, but manga was toting 2.25 million, why aren't we seeing so much more bragging about it? I looked up the top-selling novels, like you go into Barnes & Noble and buy a novel, of 2021 to see if 2.25 would impress them. And considering the highest-selling book, which was part 10 of a series, only got 1.3 units sold, I don't understand why we were not hearing more about the insane Demon Slayer numbers outside of a few resources. Well, the answer is simple once I really dug down into it. Manga's tracked by a series, not as individual sales. Viz's best-selling manga of 2021 was actually My Hero Academia Volume 1 at 162,949 units. But as a series, it sold 1.8 million in 2021. At the time of writing this, I believe that My Hero has close to 34 volumes. So at the time of 2021, it was probably around 31 volumes. Demon Slayer is the same thing, but the 2.25 million is also bolstered by box sales, which contains multiple copies of a manga. I owned the Demon Slayer box set, and it has like 20 volumes in it. So that would explain the numbers better as to how they only have 2.6% of the market share, but have seemingly insane numbers for their sales. It's the reporting methods of manga. It's not the same as comic books. So at this point I thought, well, I've solved the mystery. Comic books are succeeding, sales and unit sales are up. I proved myself wrong about manga, which means I need to rewrite the whole manga versus American comic books video, which works because now I can promote Comicstorian a little bit later. But I had one final idea. If we're going to count all of the sales for My Hero, Demon Slayer, and such, what if I counted all of the Batman books? That's when I discovered something insane in the 2021 numbers. Batman doesn't exist. You see, in 2020, DC decided to break away from Diamond distributors. Diamond had a stranglehold as it was the only way to get your comic books into a broader market, but COVID hit them hard, and without going into the Diamond distributors drama, DC decided to leave and try 2 brand new distributors that were in full effect by 2021, and then they dropped one of those, only going with Lunar distribution. But as of 2021, there is 0 tracking for DC Comics in any of these massive lists, which means 2021's 8 million units sold does not include DC Comics, which does not include Batman. And why is Batman important other than the fact that Batman's incredible? Well, let's have a look at the last year we have full tracking from DC. In 2019, the top 50 books accounted for 8,084,000 units sold. That was 8 million comic books sold. If you do a search for the key phrase Batman and find every book sold with Batman as a title character, he's in the name, it just says Batman and something else. I did a search for that for all 450 books. In 2019, Batman sold 4 million units alone, a little bit over that, which means that Batman by himself sold half of the units sold by the top 50 books. So if we compare series to series, My Hero Academia sold 1.8 million in 2021, which is incredible. But Batman sold just shy of 4.1 million in 2019. Again, this is not to take away from the accomplishments of manga. I also want to note that in Japan, manga is revered and accepted all over. These are the sales numbers for your favorite manga in Japan by series in 2021, and this is pretty incredible. And then here's some fun numbers of the individual volumes as they sold in Japan. They are crushing it over there compared to the numbers for US comic books over here. Now that brings us to the conclusion of this video. Are comics dying? In response to so many people in my comments trying to inform me that comics are in fact dead. Comic books have been around since the 40s. They've survived war, censorship, Christian groups coming after them, paper shortages, literal bankruptcy, and multiple recessions. I never truly believed that comics were dying, but even though I stay off of social media, I can't ignore the comments on my channel. But it wasn't until I was deep diving into my manga discussion did I really see how incorrect the statement that comics are dying is. Manga's killing it, and I love reading both American comic books and manga. And when I heard rumors that manga is what is boosting the comic book sales, I thought, cool, maybe I'll meet more people to talk about manga with. And yes, manga did shoot up 160% in the US market in America. And that's tied to a lot of things. Anime, promotion, Netflix primarily. But that's all a video for another time, as this one is long enough with just generic stock footage and boring images. I hope you guys enjoyed and I hope to see you again. Here we recap and bring you a synopsis of your favorite comic books. We help you break into the ever-growing market that doesn't even know how to steer people to the next story. And while this one was more on point and kind of an organized video, normally I kind of talk off the cuff. I just felt like I didn't want to get the facts wrong for this one. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time right here.